Hey, what's up, Cosmetic family?
Welcome to the Cosmetic Podcast.
Powered by the YMCA Metropolitan Dallas.
Cosmetic means being a person or thing that gives rise to a phenomenon that is dynamic or energizing.
Hey, we're tackling topics and telling the truth.
I'm Rodrigo Ross.
And I'm Keith Benson.
So today, we have another installment of our YUSA Innovation Series. Y'all, if y'all have not listened to the other installments, you're missing out. Get your life.
You're missing out.
Go back and find them, and you will not be disappointed with this one today.
Promise.
We are here with Heather Hughes, Senior VP of Strategic Alignment at YUSA, Ilana Lipsett, the Senior Program Manager at Institute for the Future, and Alden Nowell, Burke, Director of People and Culture at Design for America. Welcome to the Cosmetic Podcast.
Thank you for having us.
So nice to be here.
So excited to have you all on this next installation. I have been learning so much about the innovation process and hearing about the amazing folks that we are partnering with in so many different areas. And I also get a chance to kind of talk with colleagues across the movement, and people are really like grasping this whole innovation process. And so to hear that YUSA is not just putting it out there for the movement to use, but they're also doing it themselves in our next strategic plan, The Bold and the Beautiful. No, that was a
soap opera.
Oh, that was a soap opera. That wasn't.
That came on before General Hospital, I believe.
That's when my grandmama made us be quiet. So it's not The Bold and the Beautiful, Heather. What is this new strategic plan?
It is the bold shared vision. So
yes.
We have a unique strategic plan right now where we put the planning of the next strategic plan into the strategic plan. And we're planning for a bold shared vision in our next one so that we are all on the same page and can do something together by the time we start our next plan.
I love it.
Well, who's out there pushing you all to be so bold and to be so innovative?
Well, of course, the Y movement is always innovative. That's our nature. That's our history. That's what we do. We are innovative. And I think what happened during the last strategic plan process is that people were kind of thinking, okay, we just need to get our feet under us after the pandemic. We just want to focus on some nuts and bolts here. But we don't want to stop dreaming. So it really was all of us together saying, okay, let's really focus, on what we need to do right now to get ready for the future. And so it really is a combination of, what Suzanne wants us to have, McCormick, who's our CEO, wants us to have a shared vision. Yeah. And of course, the Y and our boards and all the people want us to be bold to strengthen communities. So that's what's really pushing us to do this.
A bold shared vision, not The Bold and the Beautiful.
Not The Bold and
not the same thing.
Does that even still come on?
I'm gonna check it out. I could probably go online or something.
I'm sure you probably still watch soap operas too, don't you?
You all can. Whatever.
Hey, look, but outside of the Y, you got some partners that are on the call with us. How are you guys making sure you just keep them in check just a little bit? Like when they start talking about, we are a swim and gym organization. Like, how do y'all help them just like nudge them just a little bit more? Just like, no, let's move on from that right there.
Yeah, well, one thing I'll step in and say, really this emphasis of the bold shared vision, really dissecting those three words. At Design for America, what we're really focused on is how to create those bold shared visions with youth, right? With Design for America's audience is primarily college-age students, but we've been working with the YMCA, Heather, I think now for close to 4 years. And there's real alignment in that we are a distributed network who are trying to create spaces where youth, whether they're in middle school, high school, in college campuses, are really being able to have agency, really teaching, using the design process to world build. And so when the YMCA talks about a bold shared vision, that sharing needs to include the youth, right? Absolutely. I think that so much of what the YMCA does and focuses on, and in that ubiquity, right? Like I have stories and memories of going to the YMCA when I was a kid with my dad, right? Like in Nyack, New York, we would go on Saturdays and he would play basketball and I would hang out while he was doing that. And the YMCA is such a touch point in so many people's lives. But what happens when you get older and your understanding of what the YMCA is? And so what we want to do and what Design for America does is using the design process to give youth the tools to advocate for what really matters to them. And I don't know anyone else that is like as bold as high school students. And so bringing them really into this process around like what matters to you, like how do you create community within the YMCA and outside of the YMCA that grows as you grow, and it creates those sort of reciprocal ways of being and moving and supporting yourself and your community moving along. So Design for America is really excited to bring in this sort of youth voice into that shared vision.
I love it. Intentionally bringing in that youth voice. That's good stuff.
Because they got a mouth on them.
And they will share.
They sure do. They sure do.
They will share.
Because what happens is that I think sometimes as adults, I would say as parents, I would say as me.
Yeah, as adults, as parents, as him, right?
You don't realize the strength of a child's voice, of a teenager's voice.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we miss it sometimes when we don't allow them to have say or give opinion, because like they're growing up and like we've taught them right as parents.
Right.
We teaching them in school like you utilize this voice, but yet sometimes we'll just shut them out.
Yeah. Or valuing the fact that they do kind of know what they want, right? Like we just, you don't know enough, you haven't lived enough.
Right,
like, with the little bit I live, I know I want this and not that. And
Hello.
They will freely share that information.
So what does that design process look like as you're working with young people?
Yeah, for sure.
Young people, I got to define something because
I'm young people. Don't even act like that.
Well, yes, in comparison to.
Yeah, so the design process that Design for America focuses on is really process-based, right? So how are we using different tools and steps to immerse into a community, to learn how to ask questions, to identify problem spaces, but not be limited to the sort of initial question that you're going to ask? Because when you're asking a question, right, like there are so many layers of assumptions that are in that initial question. And so how do you actually go out and work with different youth communities to better understand like who are the users that are actually impacted by what we're talking about? And in this case, it's engaging the YMCA spaces, right? So how do we really bring in, how do you build a bigger table? How do you have more seats at the table? How do you create a table that actually maybe folds up and packs up and we're actually sitting on the floor because we don't want to sit at the table? And really different understanding expertise in a different way. And so the design process is really emphasizing that, right? Like what are empathetic interview skills that you can bring into a space to really understand the people that you're working with? How can you use any of the tools around you to prototype and build different ideas and solutions that are not high tech, right? But you're using paper and construction paper and pipe cleaners, right? To like create something that people can then test and actually learning like how do people respond and move into this space, and really using storytelling, I think, is a big aspect of this too, to understand like what is the world that we want to build together and what are the tools that we can all bring into this space and how can we sort of prototype and come up with these different solutions and not solution from the beginning, but really bring a creative, critical problem solving mindset into the work.
I love that. I love that. I love being intentional about centering their voice and understanding that the methods that we may use when we're talking with other populations may not necessarily be the best methods for this population, and that they're not a homogeneous group, right? Like just because you talk to these 4 young people doesn't mean they speak for all of us. See how I slid that in there? All of us young people.
Just finished watching the All of Us. That was a series, right? A TV series.
All of us, like all of us young people.
Yeah, I'll say one of the things we're really excited about is partnering with the YMCA and the Institute of the Future, right? Of like Design for America, really thinking about this sort of youth perspective and using the ways that we're going to partner with different YMCAs across the country, pair them up with different DFA studios that we have about 40 across the country, to really test it and learn and gain insights that are talking about these sort of immediate spaces of the YMCA, but the Institute of the Future, right? Like you all taking even this bigger picture, and how can we create and create pipelines of information around what we are seeing more immediately in the YMCAs and what youth want, and how that connects to this larger bold shared vision.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That was a wonderful segue too, right?
Ilana, I mean, I like the name of your organization because it's like it's always relevant, right? Like regardless, 100 years from now, it's still relevant because it's about the future.
Right.
What's you guys' role in this all? Because you've traveled the world doing all this great work.
Yeah, well, and it was so nice to hear Alden's update, because I think there's so much synergy in the way that you all approach the design process and what you're doing, and kind of thematically how we're working with more kind of the staff side of the Y as well. And looking, I mean, really futures thinking is about imagining the futures that we want, and then figuring out how we get there. What do we need to do today to get to the futures that we want? And it's not about predicting the future, but really expanding our kind of mental aperture when we think about possible futures, and how do we place ourselves in kind of like possibility and potential space as opposed to problem space, right? And so much of what you're talking about, Alden, with how you're working with the youth is also so relevant for the process that we're using with the Y staff. So specifically, we have a series of design sessions that we're going to be conducting. Actually, the first one is next Friday. All the way through September, we'll be doing them at the GA as well, in engaging as many staff as possible in identifying and kind of aligning on what are the major changes that are happening around us, and how's that going to impact us, and then what do we want to do in order to address those changes, to be more prepared for the future, to be more resilient, to be more adaptable, and really to co-create, to this point of the bold shared vision, to co-create this vision for the future together. And my hope is that the process itself will be just as impactful as the end goal, as the plan, so that there is kind of an invitation for people to step into a different way of thinking about the future, and allowing ourselves to kind of see this range of possible futures. And again, then with that, having a sense of, what are the ones we want to move towards, and what do we need to do to get there? And what are the ones that we want to avoid? And what do we need to do to make sure that we don't move in those directions?
Yeah, I love that. Using the lens, like shifting your lens to possibility of potential as opposed to problem solving. Like, that's a t-shirt. Y'all better put that on a t-shirt and sell out quick. That's a t-shirt right there. I love that.
So when you talk, one of the things I think about is the Jetsons. And so the creator of the Jetsons, he created the Flintstones also right around the same time. Now, how does a mind work in such that you could think 100 years down the road, and probably prehistoric
at
days.
The same time?
How do we get our mindset? You guys talk about this bold vision, bold shared vision, right? But how do we get to a place that we can get a collective body to be able to think, beyond swim and gym, beyond aerobics, beyond membership, like
as we see it today, right? Membership as it exists. That's what I think the Institute for the Future is here to help, right? Co-create, help us. They're kind of like the trainers of that muscle for us, like our personal trainers for that muscle.
Well, Heather,
I said personal training. You got
that trick. So Heather, I feel for you right now, Rod. If it's any comparison to like the personal trainer, because I have my personal trainer on Monday. I've been running for him the last couple of weeks.
Well, it is a new muscle for us, and that's really what we're trying to do, is think about a different way of planning together to think about those possibilities. And some of our exercises that we'll do is kind of turning the future on its head, or taking our current facts and saying, okay, how do we want those facts to be different? So Keith, you mentioned, the Y is perceived as a swim and gym. Well, how do we want to be perceived?
Right.
And that kind of lends itself to broader thinking in our strategic plan. And I think the example you used was interesting, Keith, because we are also interested in our patterns of the past. So we're fortunate at the Y that we have a long history, an archived history. So we are working with the archives as well to think about our patterns of the past so that we can get to the clarity of our future. And so if we look at the ways we've behaved in the past, we can say, hey, that worked, that was great, or we want to do it different this time. And then that helps us to be really clear about where we want to go. And there's going to be times when we're not all certain about how we're going to get there, or times where we'll say, well, this Y can't do that, but this Y can. It's okay, because it should be big enough that all of us can contribute in some way.
Right. See themselves in the plan. Yes.
And I think the other thing we're going to try to turn around is that historically, the YUSA strategic plan has been like, well, here's our strategic plan and everybody, follow suit. Well, what if through this bold shared vision, we see what everyone else is doing and we say, okay, this is what we're going to do. This is what we want to do together. And it's not top down, but it's built together to move forward. So that's how we're trying to get everybody into this. And there'll be something for everybody in it. The design sessions we'll do some with youth, we'll do some that are just interactive and virtual, there'll be some in person, some not in person, all sorts of different ways for people to feel comfortable to be involved.
And so Ilana, tell me about, because it feels like to me you all are in kind of a precarious spot where you want to definitely help us learn how to flex our muscle and in different ways of creating our future. But you also have to be the person to be like, look, now get yourself together, YMCA, the USA. Y'all staying stuck in the mud, right? But you don't want to say, don't use my words, because that probably won't work. That's why I don't work for Institute for the Future. They probably would hate me if I said it like that, right? But you guys are kind of in that dual space, and I really can appreciate YUSA for being vulnerable enough to know we need somebody in that space to help us stay calibrated. But how do you do that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. And also, Keith, I love that you brought up the kind of the same person created the Jetsons and the Flintstones. And one of the first things that we do when we're working with a new client or when we're starting a project is this activity that we called look back to look forward. So before you can start looking to the future, you need to look back at least 3 times as long. So if you're looking, 15 years in the future, we look back 45, 50 years and get a sense of what led us to where we are. And part of the reason for doing that is, like Heather said, to see what has worked and what hasn't worked. And also, especially when you do this as a collective exercise, you get to start to see what are our assumptions, what are our biases, who's been left out of this history that we want to make sure is included and centered in going forward. So kind of, to answer your question, another piece of that is that the reason that talking about history is so important is, I'm going to get a little neuroscience-y nerdy for a second.
I love it.
The reason that thinking about transformative futures can be so difficult is that the same parts of our brain that we use to think about the past is what we use to think about the future, which makes sense because the past is what we know. And so when we start to imagine the future, our brain, the parts of our brain that fire up are the ones that are accessing memories and kind of history. And so it makes it really difficult then to, like you guys are saying, to think, well, what else can we be? What can exist beyond what we already know? And so a lot of the tools and the approaches that we use recognize that and acknowledge that that is just a function of being human, right? We have this kind of we want to plan. It's in our nature, and it's also not. And that's why it's so hard for us to make a budget for ourselves or stick to a diet or anything that has to do with thinking long term. And so we have a whole set of tools, and some are games, some are more kind of playful imaginative activities, some are more systematic analyses of what is this particular transformation in the way that we're working mean? How's that going to impact our facility staff? How's that going to impact our volunteers? How's that going to impact parents? So kind of a combination of imaginative activities, like Heather was saying, flipping what we know, flipping the future, flipping what we know is true today on its head, and then getting a sense of, okay, what, how might that actually look in the future? What would that world look like? And then also these more kind of systematic analyses tools. And so again, all of them are designed with an understanding of how our psychology and how our neuroscience works, so that we can help people overcome that just innate humanness that kind of sometimes keeps us stuck in the present.
That is so fascinating. Like, Heather, I'm not jealous. I will be so caught up in the process, I will forget to take notes about what really came out of. They would ask me, oh, so what's the plan? I'm like, I don't know. I was just having fun. I don't know.
You talk about looking back, and one of the things I think about is is how we played this huge role in tobacco back in and smoking cigarettes, right? Back in World War II, I believe it was. And how the Y used to deliver cigarettes to the soldiers. And if you think about where we are in the space now, like, we wouldn't have anything to do with that right now. And to me, that's just like that growth step. We talk about how you look back in order for you to move forward. Like, to me, that's a bold example of like, hey, here's where we were and here's where we are now. Just even think about where we could be in another 50 years.
Yeah.
To hopefully get people outside of that box of change. Because sometimes we just get stuck here. We keep saying that we don't want to be known as a swimming gym, but we continue to remind people that, hey, we're not a swimming gym. Why do you keep saying it then?
Yeah, I mean, that's such a good point, that when you look across the history, it reminds you that you can change, right? That change is possible, and that drastic change is possible. So it's a really good reminder that
and that when you know better, you do better as an organization. Like, my fear is that when you do that look back, people are going to be triggered by some of the things that happened in the history of the organization at a time when you just didn't know any better, right? But now that you know better, it doesn't erase the fact that you did it. You admonished it. We did it. We didn't know better. Like, at the time, we didn't understand. Like, I'm sure we was riding kids around on school buses and in cars without seatbelts, bouncing all over the place, right? But we know better now, so we do better. We didn't have lifeguards at pools. They didn't even wear clothes in the pool. That's not happening these days, right? So when you know better, you do better. And as an organization, we are emotionally mature enough to understand that and then push forward to a better future.
So Alden, when we think about our young people and being deeper involved in this process, like what is your hope to see at the end of all of this?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that feels particularly exciting about all of this partnership too is what we've been talking about, right? How do you create a space for people, young people, folks who've been at the Y for 30 years to feel out the edges of what is possible, what they think is possible, and then push that a little bit further. And it's not about cracking it all open at once, but I think it's about giving people and youth the tools to really start to move those boundaries, to feel out those edges. One of the things that we really have started to practice with DFAers is that process of self-reflection, and how do we actually build in time and space to understand our wants, our needs and desires, and an organizational wants and needs and desires, and how do those interact? Where do they intersect? Where do they complement each other? Where are the tension points? And how do we use that sort of reflection and that self-knowledge to figure out better ways to collaborate, better ways to communicate? And I think also one of the things, about the Institute of the Future, for the Future, working with YMCA, of like really creating capacity for staff to also push some of those boundaries, right, is going to model to the youth at the YMCAs how to do that as well. And so there's a real complementary thing that I think is going to start, we're hoping to start to see, right, of how these different audiences, whether it's Y staff or whether it's Y youth change makers, that they're starting to like mirror each other in this capacity building and in this sensibility of, how do we expand what we can imagine, and then what thus is possible, and giving language and tools around how to do that.
I love that. I know here in Dallas, we really are re-energizing our commitment and our efforts around teens, right? Like, we were doing great teamwork. Teens were coming into our buildings and into our programs, but it wasn't so much of us really being futuristic in our thinking and being very intentional. It was just us making sure we created the spaces and accommodate and welcome them as they came to our door. And so I'm excited about this process because you're right. It could give us the tools when we're being intentional and trying to interface with those younger populations, whether it's through programs, young people on our staff teams, you know, how to mitigate turnover in those spaces. Like, we really do need to freshen up the toolbox when this is so, Heather, how are you going to manage this? Like, you got to manage all the people and all of this. I would be so excited. Oh my gosh.
Well, I want the managed part to me is the tenured staff.
Ooh.
And so,
Yep. So everyone will have the opportunity to participate. And I'll just tell you this interesting story that happened. We had a listening session with some of our tenured staff a few weeks ago. And the first two design sessions are designed for younger staff. And one of the folks said, you know, other people have something to say too. And, you know, of course, I said, of course they do. And everyone's welcome. But really, folks are oversampled in a certain age group in some of the work that we do.
Yeah.
And so really what we're trying to do is even it out, not trying to say, you know, the tenured staff won't have anything to say. They're always going to have something to say, and they have the natural throughway to do that. But we haven't been intentional about connecting with our younger staff or young people in communities in this type of a process. So it's more about creating it to be more level rather than having some age groups oversampled.
Yes, I love it. Two things can be true. Like, we can absolutely value your opinion. We recognize you know, you're seasoned in the area. You might be able to help us with some pitfalls, and you need to hush because we need to hear from them too. Right? Like, two things can be true.
Yeah. I mean, we always said this, even when we're working, you know, as we're working with change makers, you know, if you want to go back to history, George Williams was a young man when he started the Y. And so it is that spirit of youth that it doesn't mean that tenured staff, I love that word, Keith, thank you for that. The tenured staff, they don't have to step aside.
No.
But they have to be with. We have to do it together so that people are ready to and have, you know, and they can respect the experience that each other has. So that's really what we're trying to do, is to really involve more voices, not less of anybody else.
Yeah. If you look at the history of the United States, most of the game-changing movements, things that have fundamentally shifted society, were started by young people.
I mean, it's an under 30 crowd that moved our world.
It moved.
I mean, Dr. King, you say George Williams, what, 22, I believe it was? 22 years old. Dr. King was 26. So when we start thinking about that, and for those tenure folks, that
did y'all see that level of shade just now?
Folks who
we saw it
of age. We think sometimes that it's, you know, I got to be 40, 45, 50 years old before you can make this like bold
move. Have valuable input.
Yeah, and it's like, no. I mean, I would bet that if you looked at most companies, I would think that it was probably under 30 when the idea came about and it produced into the results of where it is today. And it's so
I mean, yeah, if you just even take a look at yourself, I'm 51 years old. I was much more interesting in some of the ideas I had because I might not have, just like Ilana was saying, there is this pattern that you start to say, well, this didn't work, this did work. And you almost have to be unencumbered by that and that's not to say that, you know, I can't think of something interesting or great to do, but I might have more barriers in my own thinking. And so but I have experience, which is also valuable to the process. Somebody probably gave Dr. King advice or George Williams advice, and they probably took it, and that helped too.
And ran with it. And then there's just a different kind of energy, right? That young people bring, like, because look, at about 9:30, I hope the revolution is over because I'm going to bed. Look, y'all keep revolutionizing. I'm going to sleep.
I got an invitation the other day to go to this upcoming party, and I didn't read the whole thing. I just got the invitation. I'm cool. I'm free that day. Then I looked at the time.
So that's what time y'all gonna start?
I said 9 o'clock to 2 a.m. I said, oh, Lord. Well, if I ain't out the house by 6, man, it might be a wrap.
So note to the team, if y'all want to be involved in any strategy design, please make it before 6 o'clock.
Yes, we will.
I'm good. I just got to get, got to stay cranking. Don't ask me to crank up late now.
That's terrible, Keith.
Man. Well, this is amazing. I mean, we got great work that is ahead of us. Looking forward to being involved in the process itself. I'm registered, signed up, but Heather, tell other folks how we can get Y folks involved in this process.
So there is, if Y people are on link, they can go to the accountability portal, which is a button right in front of the home page, and there's opportunities there. For the Bold Shared Vision, we'll have design. The one next week is closed. We're already over full on that design session, but we'll have another one in May. We will have a session at ME at GA. And also a CEO and a CVO session at General Assembly. And if you are at General Assembly, there'll be a booth there for us to talk about the patterns of the past and the clarity of the future, and there'll be an interactive board. And since it's a virtual board, after GA, we're going to move it out for all Y people to have a say in that virtual board as well. So, and then of course, I wouldn't be complete if I didn't have a lot of info sessions at the end of the year. So we'll have information sessions at the end of the year too. So all of that's listed on the accountability portal if any Y people are going there, and all easy to find and easy to join.
Good luck, Heather. This is no small task. You and the team. I'm excited and ready to hear what bubbles up, what germinates out of this process. Y'all are doing it.
Ilana, though, share with us where folks can find you guys and if they're interested more about this process, because I'm sure the people who are listening, they're going to get excited about this Institute of the Future.
Institute of the Future.
I'm going to dig a little bit more deeper because you're always relevant.
Yeah, absolutely. Our website is IFTF, Institute for the Future, IFTF.org. We have tons of free resources on our website. And we also have a number of free webinars that we offer monthly. And it's with a number of different practitioners, people who use futures thinking and foresight in their work. And it ranges from how to use foresight and future thinking and strategic planning to kind of creative participatory engagement processes to Afrofuturism to book talk. So if you sign up on our website, tons of free resources to learn more about it. And we hope for the Y folks, we hope to see you at the GA in July.
Nice. And of course, Alden, you got to give your plug for Design for America.
Yeah, for sure. If folks are interested in finding out about more, you can visit the website. It's designforamerica.org. While the organization really focuses on students in college campuses, we have a whole network of thousands of alumni and mentors. And so if anyone is interested in connecting, feel free to go to the website. We're working on alongside with the YMCA, we're working on some really great future of work projects, really thinking about, how are we sort of reckoning with new modes of being and moving and operating in the workplace. And folks are also welcome to reach out via email, info@designforamerica.com. We would love to get connected and get as many people involved as possible.
Nice. Thank you, Heather. Thank you, Ilana. And thank you, Alden. You all were amazing. If people get half as excited as I am, you're going to have participants and calls and connects all over the place. Thank you. And before
Thanks for having us.
We got to give props to our producer, Lachey Leonard. Hey, Lachey.
Hey, thank you guys for listening to the Cosmetic Podcast.
On this next episode in our YUSA Innovation Series featuring Heather Hughes, Ilana Lipsett, and the Alden Nowell Burke.
Hey, subscribe and listen to us weekly.
And don't be shy. Give us a 5-star review.
And as always,
Be dynamic.
be phenomenal.
Be
Cosmetic.